Welcome to Crypto Capital, a podcast to talk about Crecimiento and our journey to make Argentina the crypto capital of the world. Argentina is in a very unique position as it is probably the only country that has crazy levels of bottoms-up adoption, like top 4 in terms of people using crypto, crazy talent, but also political top-down support. There's a very good landscape for innovation and technology in general. And that's probably the main reason why Crecimiento exists, to catalyze this opportunity to accelerate growth, accelerate innovation, and lift quality of life for millions of people through technology. We have Juan Benet, who has been very involved in the beginning of Crecimiento in designing and shaping this vision. So he's probably a perfect person to talk about why this is such a good opportunity and how to make the most out of it. Welcome, Juan. It's super nice to talk to you.
Thank you. Excited to be here. Excited to chat.
You are here. Where are you now exactly?
In Aleph de Verano, in the second to last day of the pop-up in December, the second pop-up. And yeah, it's a very exciting moment in Buenos Aires.
If I have it right, this is your third time in Argentina, right?
Yeah, that's right. This is my third time in Argentina, yeah.
So let's probably begin by that. Why Argentina? Why brought you 3 times in the same year to this beautiful country? What are you doing here?
Yeah. Well, so, I'd never been to Argentina before Crecimiento kind of started. And it always been a very interesting country to me. Like I've been, a big student of history, so I've been looking at all the different kinds of countries. And I was born in Mexico and grew up there, and then I grew up in the United States and so on. And this is, by the way, why we're speaking in English instead of Spanish. But I've always been very interested in all of the Latin American countries, and I'd always wanted to come and visit, but hadn't managed to. So earlier in the year, a friend of mine and I, Martin Carrica, and I were on a ski lift talking about the fact that Milei won the election, and this was after many years, even decades, of rampant inflation and Argentinians being so fed up with the current economic conditions that they wanted a massive change, and they voted for truly a big shift in the economic outlook for Argentina. And that created, and not just that, but Milei, when he came in, started following through with everything that he said in this campaign trail of starting to go after, cutting down inflation, slowing things down, opening up the possibilities for crypto, implementing a lot of libertarian rules, rather deregulating, so implementing a lot of libertarian ethos by removing rules. And that became like this amazing opportunity where, Martin and I were discussing, in these 4 years, there's an amazing possibility where if the bottoms-up support of crypto and the tops-down support from Milei can meet in the middle, it could revitalize the entire Argentinian economy and enable this new macroeconomy built with crypto financial rails from scratch. And it's kind of like this crazy opportunity. And so from that ski lift, we both were like, wow, this is like a really big, significant thing. We have to like go do this. And a good way to kickstart this kind of movement would be by hosting a pop-up city. Because, I'd been to Suzalu before, and I'd been part of Edge City. And so I'd seen the, great effect that building a culture for a period of time together in one place, can diffuse ideas very quickly. So that was kind of like, moment in, I think, February or March. Yeah, it might have been February, kind of like around ETH Denver, and right before ETH Denver. And at ETH Denver, I was talking about this idea with Janine from Edge City and James Stunningly from PL, an architect, and Ruben and a few other people, Molly. And we kept talking about the possibility of this kind of thing happening. And we said, okay, well, if we were to do a pop-up city, it would have to be sometime in the next few months. And let's go to Argentina and meet people there and talk about this and see what people think. And we took a trip in the end of April, and we came down with this kind of, well, I guess actually before that, we hosted a summit online. We hosted a summit online. James organized a summit pretty quickly, brought in people like many Argentinian founders who had been thinking about this similar kinds of ideas. We brought in Diego Fernandez, who was already the director of innovation in Buenos Aires at the time, and who had building Cork ID and implementing all of this kind of ZK credentialing setup in Buenos Aires. And so we had a summit talking about the opportunity space of like, hey, why Argentina? Why now? What's the opportunity space? In fact, a lot of the ideas that fed into the movement got discussed in that virtual summit. You can find all the talks online. And then we, instead of us traveled to Buenos Aires in the end of April, and we then started having a set of meetings and dinners and so on to talk about this possibility space. And we were kind of blown away, like very quickly. Every conversation just amplified, and everyone had a very strong optimistic perspective of this is the moment, like this is the opportunity, let's go for it. And kind of by the end of the weekend, so we were here, a few days, we met up with a lot of people. We went on a boat trip to Colonia in Uruguay. And by the end of the weekend, we had like amassed just this few hundred people that were super stoked about the idea of potentially doing this. And one of the most seminal moments in that entire thing was having, we came to the last day of the Mu Buenos in Buenos Aires. And that's where I met you, Santi, and Emmy, and a few other people. We hosted a session about Crecimiento. And we then had, people got like super fired up. And we then had a day of working sessions of shaping the movement of like, and that's kind of like properly like when the movement was properly born, of saying, hey, we're going to go do these set of things. We're going to host this pop-up. This is what it should do. This is why it matters. And like we, set off to like, shape the thing. And yeah, I don't know. That's what, and so that was like kind of like the first time I came to Argentina. The second time I came for the first Aleph, which was the first major pop-up. And then the third time is here now for Aleph de Verano.
That's awesome. That's awesome. That's a very clear explanation of like the origin of Crecimiento and how it went from an idea into people getting excited, into actually taking shape and organizational structures to follow the vision. Were you actually surprised by the level of engagement and hype that the people show you when you guys came in?
Yeah, so it was kind of like this interesting thing where maybe the first couple of conversation were more pessimistic, of people being like, oh yeah, that would be amazing, but not in Argentina. It's never going to happen. The government like this, the government that. And it was a little bit pessimistic. And those were maybe the first meetings. But then you would meet people in an asado. In an asado, the conversation completely changes. People got way more optimistic, maybe having a nice steak, good thing to eat. And the entire culture just like shifted of like, oh, if not now, when? Like, if not us, then who? And, kind of like by the end of those asada conversations, everybody was like really fired up. So maybe like the first day or two, it was a little bit kind of like, oh, this seems too idealistic. But, very quickly by those asados and by the end of the weekend, everyone was super fired up and like, let's go do this. This is kind of like the time has come.
Awesome, awesome. So there's a very good learning in there.
Yeah, and it really was like striking, like it was just kind of us pointing out a possibility that everybody already felt or that everybody already knew. Like a lot of people had been thinking about the similar set of ideas, just maybe not exactly in this particular way. And so it was really not, kind of nothing fundamentally new. It was more creating the conditions to like enable people to like say, yes, let's go do this.
Do you think the fact that you were involved with the whole PL network kind of supporting the idea was determinant in people getting so excited?
I don't know. It's a good question. My sense is that maybe for some people it felt like that gave it a lot of strength. But I think for a lot of people it didn't matter. Like for a lot of people, they kind of understood the idea more, and whether PL was supporting it or not didn't matter. Like I think they would have just gone for it anyway. I think for some people it probably did add a little bit of strength and support behind it to make it feel like a bigger thing. But I think many people would have gone for it anyway.
Yeah, they bought the vision, not only the people behind that. So you talked about the ideation and then that trip. People at the beginning were a bit pessimistic, but then some steak, some wine, and they're like, "Oh, okay, let's do it. It's now, it's us. Like there's no better option." You had to go back somewhere you probably had a long flight, more than 2 hours for sure, after that week of many, many events, many asados, many meetings.
Yeah.
You probably were very tired, but you were also very reflective. What were your thoughts after that entire week of flights?
So I actually got to, right after being in Buenos Aires, instead of flying north, I flew south. I went to Patagonia for a few days in the mountains, and we went to just relax for a few days. And there, I think decompressing, was definitely in a very reflective, relaxed mood, and it just felt so invigorating to have found something that people care about so much, and the opportunity being possible, that it just felt like, yes, let's go do this. Like, this is gonna be epic.
It's crazy when you feel the energy of people around you getting so excited. It really like, okay, let's do it. It's bring you extra energy. Why do you think people care so much?
I mean, I think it's probably maybe two large communities that each individually care a lot about this, and then there's kind of an intersection. So one community is just a lot of Argentinians who, grew up knowing the pain points of the financial and economic mismanagement of the last few decades. People who look back and reflect, Argentina was in the top of the world at the beginning of the 20th century. One of the top 10 countries by GDP, and a bunch of economic mismanagement wrecked the country for decades, and they really feel both the amazing talent here and the possibility and the opportunity, and they feel frustrated by the problems, and there's just a very strong pent-up desire to fix it. It's the same reason why Milei got elected. It's like people here are just fed up and tired of these kind of like bad systems, and want a very real change, and are willing to like work for it. And so I think like this one of big group of people is just that. And then maybe some surrounding, maybe not just Argentinians, but like people adjacent to Argentina that kind of think this way. And then there's a set of another community, which is the crypto community, who in a similar way is kind of fed up with bad intermediary financial systems that were set up many decades ago, in some cases centuries, and who have been working for many years, in some cases 10 or over 10 years, on building this new internet native financial system that we call crypto. And whether it's people that came from Bitcoin, or people that came from Ethereum, or came from many of the other crypto communities, they're people that have seen a better future through this new technology, and people who have seen how good it could be, and how disintermediated it can be, how decentralized it could be, how fair it could be, who like know that this is just a better infrastructure for the financial world, and just want an opportunity to help bring that about, and enable it to happen. And so that community is just kind of like, it's global, it's worldwide in nature. It's people that would normally be part of the Moo, or be part of Edge City, or be part of would be at all of these events, whether it's ETH Denver, or DevCon, or La BitConf, or wherever. It's people that want this new financial system, who want to catalyze that change anyway. And so these two communities really want this to happen. And so it's kind of both, the intersection is really powerful, but it's really the union, right? Because we can bring people from Argentina that want this new improvement independent of crypto, and we can bring crypto people from around the world that want this change. And together, this can be this super powerful movement.
I like the comparison. If I'm getting it right, it feels like there's a lot of people that suffer from this and they need solutions. And there's a lot of people that have solutions, but they need problems to solve. So it's like kind of matching them up and saying, hey, why don't you apply all this beautiful future, all this crazy infrastructure to this country that actually really needs it?
Yeah.
Would you say that crypto was kind of missing something like that? All this community of people that are so enthusiastic about the potential of crypto. Oh, we could build this beautiful world. Do you think there's a gap there that needs to be filled somehow?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely see I spend a lot of my time working with and talking to builders, and everything from founders all the way to the users of crypto all over the world. And so many teams and companies are working in jurisdictions and in markets where the existing financial infrastructure is pretty good. And so crypto brings benefits, but the benefits are hard to sell to people. Or like if you go and try to convince people to change from, I don't know, the dollar in the US to, trying to use a crypto coin, then they'll worry about the volatility. And if you say, well, you can use USDC, then it's like, okay, well, I could change my Apple Pay system that just works for like this very, much more complicated thing on chain with a wallet and so on. He's like, oh, well, but self-custody and so on. You just sort of like lose people. It's just high friction for adoption. And so instead, there are a set of other countries where the financial problems they're very real. Like they're huge financial problems. Inflation, the lack of basic credit, no mortgages, no strong financial infrastructure. And those countries are the ones that I think have the most to gain from crypto, and where crypto can be this big leapfrogging possibility where building this new infrastructure can enable the people here to leapfrog into having one of the best financial systems in the world. And so yeah, I think the crypto world kind of needs these places. I think Argentina is at the top of that list because there are other places with high inflation like Turkey and a few other places, but Argentina has this amazing combination of incredibly talented people. So many of the best crypto projects have come out from Argentina or are like built by Argentinians, or a lot of the staff is Argentinian, and a ton of the ZK stuff in the world is built by Argentinians. So tremendous talent in terms of building, and then a community that's familiar with startups and building startups in general, a community that is deeply connected around the world, and high need with like these huge financial problems to fix, and now government support, which is like what like all of the stars are aligning. It's like a perfect moment where if this doesn't happen now, like I don't know what, like the opportunity is only will last a certain amount of time. So I think like this is a very, very special moment.
I'm gonna go deeper into the the opportunity is now idea, but I'd like to know more about your experience with Argentinian builders, because you mentioned the talent, you mentioned some examples, but when did you came to this idea or to this like, oh wait, people from Argentina are building cool stuff?
Yeah, so very early actually. So I had run into the Open Zeppelin guys very early in crypto. So this is maybe like 10 years ago or so, I think. And I had also run into the Aragon guys very early, who were the first people trying to like seriously do decentralized corporations and built an entire stack around it. And I had met the decentralized folks and just a lot of Argentinian founders over time building companies. And then separately, just in a lot of communities, I just kept seeing that teams tended to have Argentinians in the mix often, and often they were really good. Like they were very talented people, very hardworking. And I also saw that it was kind of curious that all of them had, or a lot of them had, in some cases, moved out or lived close to Argentina, but not exactly in Argentina. And that's when I sort of like dug in more. It's like, oh, interesting. It's because like the economy is not well set up for building startups there, and so people end up having to leave and have to go somewhere else. Yeah.
Well, what do you think an economy needs to do to be well prepared for startups to grow there?
Yeah. So this is, I think, is a great question, and I think it's one of those things where a lot of countries want to stimulate startup development in their country, and they tend to think about like, oh, well, we can improve this or improve that or whatever. And they tend to think of it as like, let's take the current status and improve it a little bit, or like improve it significantly, but you kind of see the problem that way. And unfortunately, that doesn't work. It's one of these counterintuitive things where you don't just have to be better, you have to be one of the best economies. And kind of what I mean by that is that think of the world of companies as this large-scale biological evolutionary environment where there'll be like a lot of biological niches that enable survival of certain companies, and the conditions are different. Like you might have a kind of like a beautiful jungle or savanna that's like very prolific, and then you might have like a harsh winter environment like where nothing survives, or a harsh desert where like there's some life, but it's like very, very difficult. And corporations can start anywhere, but because they become global very quickly and you can now market to the whole world, they tend to relocate to wherever is best to exist. So though, thanks to the internet, now you can start companies anywhere. You can really start startups anywhere in the world today, which you couldn't do, 30 years ago. It was very difficult. Today you can do that. But as the startups succeed and get better, they'll just relocate to wherever it makes sense for them to be homed at. And so it's not enough for a country to do better. It has to be one of the best environments. And the good news there is, like, it's not that hard, actually. Like, you can do the same thing that Singapore did, or Dubai, or any of these like new financial centers that got developed, which is by, like, you look around the world and you categorize all the different things that might affect a set of startups. The things like the access to capital, how easy is it to incorporate, how much money do you need to like incorporate? Is it like $100 or is it $1,000 or is it $10,000, right? It makes a huge difference. Can you hire people easily? Can you hire and fire people quickly? Can you get access to capital? Like, can you fundraise from investors? How big is the investor community in the country? Or if there isn't a strong investor community in the country, how easy is it to access the global investor community? How do you find like talented people? How do you market your products? Like, if you run into trouble in terms of disputing a contract, what are the courts like? Are the courts good? Are they quick? Can you find like easy resolution, or is it like a very laborious, difficult process? And so all of these kind of like measures, you can go and compare a lot of countries based on these, and find the best, and you just like copy and replicate what the best countries have done in your own local environment. And whether you change the existing infrastructure to apply the same way, or you create a sandbox or an economic zone, you could do it either way. But you can like replicate these amazing like new top of the line financial centers to enable kind of startup creation. I think Dubai is maybe, Singapore is an example of a place that set up the country as a whole in order to be able to be a good financial center. South Korea is the same thing, set up the entire country to be a good financial center. But Dubai is an example of setting up one specific set of, a set of special economic zones to be really good financial centers. And so we have multiple examples of either doing it like at a whole country level or doing it in a specific economic zone. But as long as you meet, the best top of the line type of environment, you can then have this great proliferation of companies there, and you'll keep them. Like, I think it's not about like enabling, new companies can be started almost anywhere. It's more about keeping them and making sure that they don't leave and go somewhere else.
Okay, let me do a quick recap to see that I get it right. We're kind of comparing like startup ecosystem to biological ecosystems. Like, you have the jungle with millions of species, and then you have like the Arctic. The only difference is that startup founders can move to the jungle. Polar bears cannot do that.
Yeah.
So then we need to make sure that we get our jungles. We need to make sure that we get like really good startup ecosystems, and there are like several reasons. We are going to dive deeper into that later on. And we can do that either by just kind of copy pasting into the whole country, which could be a bit difficult for some countries, especially maybe the size of Argentina, or maybe just special economic zones or sandbox, like a set space where you can actually try those kind of things starting from over.
Yep.
I have a question on that. Don't you think that might be changing now that we have internet and everyone is working remote and you have crypto? Is it gonna still be so different to build in Argentina compared to Berlin or compared to San Francisco?
Well, I mean, I think the difference in terms of like where the company is located is that the location of the company affects how much wealth that company creates for that country. So if a company goes and gets relocated somewhere else, but maybe say still employs a lot of people in Argentina, then the company pays salaries to the people in Argentina, and then those people that are getting paid salaries go and spend that money in the local economy, but the company doesn't pay any taxes. And then you might say, well, some of the best economic environments have little to no tax, right? Like Dubai and other places have like close to zero tax. But by having the wealth in that location and the capital appreciation of like, all of the people that are shareholders in the company in that jurisdiction, you would then enable reinvestment of that wealth into other productive capacity. So like one of the biggest, we live in a capitalist system, and one of the key things that you need in this capitalist system is that whatever wealth gets generated, you want to reinvest in the productive capacity of the economy. You don't just want to create wealth and hoard it like a dragon somewhere and like, take it out of circulation. You want to take that wealth and reinvest it into the next generation of companies. And so one of the problems that happens when, companies relocate is that, if, and we've seen this happen with multiple rounds of Argentinian innovators where the conditions weren't good enough for those companies and they ended up relocating to go elsewhere. And so they end up making their wealth somewhere else and not reinvesting that in the country. This other effect also happens where, like, one of the things that made Silicon Valley so successful and so wealthy was the great use of stock options, where a lot of the people building the company could get access to a piece of the company. And if the company ended up being really successful, they made a lot of money over time. And this practice is very normal in all of the startup world around the world. Except that I learned that in Argentina, it started being normal, but then it reduced. And the reason it reduced is because there were a set of bad cases where it just made it very difficult and intractable for people to do this. Like, there was apparently a famous case where somebody who came in many years later managed to, like, sue the company to try and get the same equity compensation that somebody who had been there for many years before. And because they won that case, companies stopped giving as much stock options because they were giving this open-ended liability that they couldn't sign up for. And so then that reduced the use of stock options as much for employees. And so that means that the wealth was not being spread to as many people in the company. It was maybe being more concentrated into, like, the investors and the founders and so on. And so, like, and if all the investors are somewhere else, and then the founders end up relocating somewhere else, then all of that wealth doesn't get reinvested in Argentina, right? And so ideally, you want a condition that's really good for capital, so the capital stays. You want the capital to stay here and get reinvested here to go back into the productive capacity of the country. You want to enable, like, the hundreds of thousands of people that help build the company to become very financially successful, and you want all of them to then reinvest that wealth directly here in this economy. Yeah.
That's very interesting. A lot of things to dive deeper. It's like, yes, you may have the team working here, but then if the capital goes elsewhere, then it's going to be invested most likely elsewhere. So then Argentina is not benefiting from the talent of the people that are founding these companies. And then you give this very concrete example of stock options and how, like, a weird situation with the stock options and legal costs involved disincentivize people to do that, which has been very successful in other places. Could you give some more other examples of, like, things like stock options that could work in other places, not here?
I think in general, I think being able to easily employ people and pay them based on, like, the impact that they have to a project tends to be difficult in a lot of countries. It's actually a rare country that lets you proportionally pay people based on the impact that they produce. Because a lot of, like, well-intentioned, it's one of those cases where, like, a well-intentioned labor law put in a set of rules, and the rules end up having the opposite effect, where, you try to, like, in that example with the stock option case, he's like, well, the idea behind that was, like, oh, equal work, equal pay, theoretically. But the same work, or, like, similar work 4 years before, is not the same work. 4 years before, that was much more impactful work, and it was worth something else. And the company was worth something else. The stock units were worth something else at that point in time. And so, like, that's just qualitatively, it's one of those cases of, like, a well-intentioned rule ending up, like, having the negative effect. And so I think, in terms of, like, other examples, I think one of these things where, like, startups really need to be able to hire quickly and fire quickly. And it's one of these cases where, like, a lot of labor laws around the world are just not tuned for that. They're tuned for manufacturing or for other environments, and they're not tuned for, like, the startup world, where, like, you need to be able to, like, very quickly readjust the composition of the team. And so again, it's a place where, like, very well-intentioned laws end up inhibiting companies from hiring people here because of that. And so what ends up happening is people end up, like, creating companies somewhere else. Like, the typical thing is that a remote worker will go and incorporate their own company in some other jurisdiction, employ themselves, and then the end company ends up hiring their company, right? And, like, that's how it works, in order to get around, like, the current, like, bad legal structure. And, like, that's just, like, really silly. It creates, like, all this extra work, and then it kind of inhibits those other employers from actually coming in and looking for more people, because of all of the possible talented people in Argentina that could work for that company, only a fraction of them are actually going to go through the trouble of setting up this external company and all that kind of stuff. This is just another example of, like, a well-intentioned rule just getting in the way of, like, the actual work and good impact, like, flowing through.
And I can already know the answer, but do you think Argentina has an actual chance of becoming a very good place for
No,
startups?
absolutely, absolutely. So I think Argentina has like this amazing setup where there has a lot of things going for it. So first of all is the talent, like incredibly talented people here across so many domains, like everything from software engineering to like product building to thinking about different possible businesses to many different domains, like super stacked in terms of all many different sciences. So in terms of talent, I think Argentina punches way above it kind of like its weight in a sense, or like comparable countries in terms of size or GDP and whatnot. So I think like the talent is like the key. I think the first and foremost most important thing. The second thing is like this innovative entrepreneurial culture, and that's kind of like it might have been described as like a hustler culture somewhere else, but I really think of it as more as like a builder culture. That's also very present in Argentina itself. So it's not just talented people; they have like the right builder enterprising culture. I just see a lot of people that like want to go and whether it's starting a company or like go and start a restaurant or go and start a thing, like they people feel productive and they want to be useful and they want to create some useful things, and those are like really good elements of the culture. And then I think everybody here or a ton of people here speak extremely good English, which is like the language of business around the world. And so that makes everybody worldwide competitive right away. And so that enables you to like interact with people around the world. And then there is strong internet penetration, which means that you can access all of the knowledge from around the world, and you can access the capital markets from around the world. Like you don't if you're building a company, you don't have to try and find only investors here. You can find investors anywhere. You can find investors in the U.S. or in other countries. So that's already really, really good. So Argentina has a lot going for it. Um, I think that the already all of these startups from Argentina are going to get built. The question is, are those startups that get built going to move somewhere else and like disappear and like leave Argentina, or are they going to stay? And if they stay, are they going to fix Argentinian problems? Like, are they actually going to, are the startups that are going to be built, are they going to improve the economic infrastructure of Argentina, right? Because if you have a founder that, could do a lot of things, and one of the things they could do is go and like, they realize that there's this problem with mortgages in Argentina. There's not that many mortgages out there. They could go and build a startup to do that and like fix this huge problem and do it here. Or they could go and, I don't know, make yet another scalability framework in blockchains and sell it like to the rest of the world somewhere else. And those are two very possible viable options that the same person could like potentially tackle. And if like the innovative landscape here is inhibiting the founder from like trying the mortgages case, they're going to end up like building solutions for other people, right? And so if we can make it easier for those founders to like choose to build the infrastructure here, if it can be very rewarding for founders to like come and solve Argentina's problems, like that will create like this very good network effect that will both keep companies here and attract immigrants from elsewhere in the world to come and build great successes here. In fact, I think this is one of the big things that Singapore and the US both did extremely well. They were very open to immigrant talent and like tried really hard to bring amazingly creative people from around the world to come and build like the future together. And so I think creating an environment where Argentina very clearly signals to the world that it wants to improve its own financial infrastructure or its own infrastructure period and its own systems, and that you can come and build great things here and be very successful doing it and very financially successful, will create this massive incentive to just bring both all the Argentinians that end up moving out back and bring many new people.
I'm pretty glad you brought this dilemma of, okay, are we gonna build something to fix the mortgages, or are we gonna build something that's global and gonna work on scalability or wherever? Why would people build something for a market that's smaller like Argentina when you could build for the world?
Yeah,
Even if we fix the regulatory side and
yeah. So in that particular case, you could either, as a founder, what you want to do is you want to find a hard problem that's valuable and that is not too crowded, right? As Peter Thiel talks about, you want to find something that is contrarian, that not a lot of people are going after. And if you're going to go build yet another scalability framework, you're like one of a few hundred, and you're going to be competing in this large uphill battle, and you're going to be looking where a lot of other people are. And while it might seem like a bigger market, it may not be, right? Like how big is the actual market for scalability in crypto? Like, nowadays, like we have all the L2s and even L3s and like other, all these rollups and other structures. there is like a real price point there. But then you compare it to like, how much real estate is there in Argentina alone? How many houses, how many commercial real estate is there? And what is the total value of that? And I would strongly bet that all of the worth of like all of the houses here and all of the real estate here is vastly larger than just like the scalability returns. So already the mortgages market is much bigger than just the basic scalability market. And then second, the same problem that you're fixing in terms of mortgages here can apply somewhere else. So Argentina might be the first market in which you're successful, but then the same thing can work in Turkey, and it can work all over LATAM, and it can go work in Southeast Asia, and then later like in Europe and the US and Africa and a bunch of other places, right? And so this can be like the first market in which you gain significant success, and then from there you can expand out to many other groups. I think of it kind of like Uber or Airbnb, where like they started in a specific market and then from there expanded out to the rest of the world. And so I think a group could do it here. Like it's like go where, if you try to build this mortgages thing in the US, it's such a crowded space already. Like it's just very difficult. But if you come to a place like Argentina where like there's very high need, you can build a product, find product market fit much faster, get a lot of financial success, and then from there springboard to like many other countries.
So you mentioned economies that are really benefiting from crypto and have like actual needs, and Argentina probably ranks like pretty high in that ranking. How do you think Argentina ranks in the ranking of opportunities for crypto builders with the current situation right now?
Oh, I think it's like I think it's the number one country actually.
Number
Like,
one country
yeah,
also
I
for
think so.
opportunities.
Yeah, I think so because the opportunity scale is enormous. Meaning like, so many of the existing financial infrastructure like needs to be improved, that you can create an enormous amount of value here. Like you can improve how real estate gets bought and sold. You can improve how real estate gets rented. You can improve how corporations get formed. You can improve how corporations raise investment. So you can improve how, funds get incorporated and get invested and so on. You can improve like the stock market. You can, tokenize like all of the corporations. You can figure out like business loans. You can figure out like bonds. You can figure out like just all of these different kinds of opportunities. And then because there's so many people that like already use crypto, they are perfectly capable and primed to take crypto jobs, meaning like jobs of paying crypto. So that means that like you can build sharing economy type businesses that pay in crypto here. Where like, why isn't there like a crypto powered Airbnb type thing, or like a crypto powered Uber, or a crypto powered like TaskRabbit or something like that? Like you could totally do that here in crypto, and that'll be much harder, say, in the US, right? Like if you were to try and create a crypto powered DeepN network in the US, you're competing with like the way that things are done today, and it's much harder. And if you do it in Argentina, Argentina's probably want crypto. They probably don't want pesos, right? And so like Argentina's probably want to be paid in crypto directly. And so that's like an example where people right here like could like the opportunity space is actually quite large. And this gives you a market that can work and scale, and then from there you can move on to other markets. And I will say, like, I do think that the tokenization market in the US is enormous, like vastly larger. And so I do think that from an opportunity sizing perspective is likely much bigger. But the US has a lot of existing incumbents. And the reason this hasn't happened in the US is because of the regulatory landscape there. And so if you try to do this kind of tokenization of real estate or securities in the US, you could succeed, but what's more likely is that one of the current incumbents is going to do it, and they're going to kind of like shut you out, or that you aren't going to find a good way through the regulatory pathway. So I think like the opportunities might be bigger in the US, but they're also like higher, like lower probability of success. So the expected value is actually higher here, I think.
Okay, I got like many different things that are related to things you need to succeed building a startups. We started talking about like the environment and like access to capital, being able to hire people and find people pretty fast, and some other examples. Then we talked a little bit about the market. Like, yeah, might be way bigger in the US, but you have way more incumbents. Here you may have like a better chance. And then like specifically regulatory framework for the industry you're trying to build on. Argentina has an amazing talent. There's like 3 or 4 different points in there. What are the most important things a founder should consider when thinking of building a startup?
Well, so first and foremost, it's like you have to deeply understand the business that you're going to have and like the product that you're going to build and what problem you're going to solve. So fundamentally, you have to solve some key problem for a large group of people that want to pay you for it or want to pay the service for. And so you have to like deeply understand what that problem is, what the product to solve it is, and then kind of like how you can turn that into a business. I think the second thing is just the process of how do you start and grow companies and projects. Like there's a certain amount of like company building knowledge that you should learn. What does it mean to have a company? What does it mean to incorporate a company and run it and like administer it? Like how do you hire people? How do you pay people? How do you fire people? How do you like set goals? How do you motivate a team? How do you like orient people to success? How do you launch a product? How do you get product feedback and so on? And then maybe the third thing is um, I think like really about um, managing people. So really so it's just beyond kind of maybe hiring or whatever. It's more about like how do you find amazingly talented people? How do you attract them to the company? How do you select them in kind of in interviews? How do you onboard them into a team and make them really productive? How do you enable them to like tackle all these like really large challenges? How do you set goals for them? How do you incentivize them well? How do you reward their growth? All of that kind of like team building component, which is part of company building, but it's like a little bit different. I think I would say those three things. And Ben Horowitz has a good post where he talks about like first, I think the ordering is like take care of the team, take care of the product, and take care of the company or like or the business. And so the idea there is like if you take care of the team first and the team is like performing well, they'll figure out the product. And if the team and the product are figured out, like the business will be doing well. And in that a lot of founders end up like trying like they like prioritize the business or they prioritize the product and so on. But kind of like the business flows from the product and the product flows from the team. And so yeah, we kind of like think about those as like the three kind of things that
I really like the way you built it because it's plain like, okay, you need to solve like a very hard problem that people are willing to pay for. Vitalik said something quite similar the other day. He said something like, okay, problem that people like something that people want to use, something that people want to pay for, and also something that will make you excited if it was not you building it. So we have like this problem, something that people actually really care about, and there is where I think Argentina, and by hearing you, I think Argentina has like a great opportunity because people really need these kind of products. And then we have, okay, you need to grow a company and a business out of that problem that you're solving and those products. And then that means like finding great talent. But then you shift it all the way and it's like, actually, you need to like get great talent. They are gonna create a great company that's gonna create good products to solve businesses and good products to solve problems. And my question there is, where in those like moments are you actually like being very influenced by the like not the regulatory, but the environment that you have around?
I mean, I think certainly when you're thinking about the problem and the potential solutions, you have to create a structure that like is going to work for people and is going to comply with laws and like and fit within the current landscape and so on. And in some cases, you might spot a thing where like, oh, actually the law doesn't quite make sense anymore, and you have to like adjust it over time. And so then you have to do the regulatory work of talking to government, talking to policymakers to like see how to adjust it. That's one of the things that I think is like really compelling about the Crecimiento movement. Like by creating the sandbox in Buenos Aires, that creates a lot of space and opportunity for the builders here to like innovate and ship things and try them out before kind of like and try to scale them without having to worry about like all of that structure. So I would say like you want to think about the environment in selecting the product landscape. But I think today, especially now with Milei and the current government, like this government is very pro innovation and pro technology and pro the private sector solving the problems. Like Milei's been very clear. Like he does not want government to solve the problems. He wants the private sector to solve the problems. So that's a big call to founders to like come and build those solutions and become successful in the market. And I think that this is where like this is like a good signal for the whole environment that like come and solve the problems and you can succeed by in doing so.
So I think we already went to all of the points that make this a great opportunity for Argentina. We have the talent, we have the users, we have the environment. So the question then is like, why Crecimiento? Is Argentina already has it all? Then why do all of this?
Well, I think it's because it has a lot of the opportunity and the potential, but it's not yet activated. And so Crecimiento is there to catalyze and like activate this potential change. You need a lot of people to think about this at the same time and to decide to do it and to then grow it. And there's another thing here around um, it, automatically these shifts might happen in a certain time frame. Like a certain number of founders might come up with certain ideas and might develop something or whatever. And something that might take many years to develop, it might take something like 4 or 6 years to develop like 10 really great startups, right? Like, because most startups fail. So startups might try something and then end up failing. And so in order to get like 10 to 20 very successful startups, you need a few hundred startups to try. Um, and that might take like 4 to 6 or 8 years, right? And the opportunity here is that if we can have that kind of financial improvement very quickly, like before Milei is out, which could happen in 2 years, right? Like it seems right now like he has a very strong position and he probably will get reelected. And then maybe that's like a longer time frame. But if not, or who knows like what support he's going to have in government, in Congress, and so on. Um, you basically want a condition where when the government is going to change, it needs to be really clear to everybody in Argentina that there has been a tremendous financial prosperity put in place, driven by these new financial primitives powered by crypto. And if that's really clear to everybody, then the Argentinian economy will lock in very successful, kind of these kind of crypto primitives, and it won't kind of like regress back, right? So Argentina has this history of having some good administrations that push things forward and propel them forward, and then some bad administrations that like wind back the progress. And so in order to kind of like lock into a mode where you just have positive progress long term, you need a certain level of success by the time that Milei is kind of like gonna leave, whether it's in 2-3 years or in 8 or whatever. And so that really means that there's a short time frame to try and cause this effect. And so that's where Crecimiento comes in. Crecimiento is a way of like kickstarting all of this, get everybody to notice this faster, get a lot of founders to be solving these problems faster, attract a lot of capital to help support those founders faster, to then enable them to build these companies and these products and these solutions to benefit Argentinians around the country faster. And you imagine if suddenly like the story, 8 years from now is like, wow, bad economic mismanagement, Milei comes in, deregulates this infrastructure, crypto comes in, brings in the next generation financial infrastructure of the world, and then suddenly like all of these amazing economic indicators, people start prospering financially. Suddenly there's a ton, millions more jobs. People now can save money. People can now like invest money into good long-term assets, whether it's like real estate or whether it's VC or whatever, or like the stock markets or indexes, kind of like the S&P 500 type equivalent online. And suddenly you have you leave the 8 years looking back and saying, wow, these like next generation financial infrastructure came in, upgraded the country, and now everyone's doing tremendously well. And like I think that can only happen by activating a lot of people to come and focus and do this quickly.
Feels like there's a great opportunity, but no one knows what's going to happen in the future. So we kind of need to get like very fast at accelerating these solutions so we can actually show, hey, crypto is like really bringing good things to people. So then it's like, okay, crypto is good. Whatever happens, crypto is good. So let's just keep crypto and let's keep this innovation.
Yeah. And exactly, I think kind of like a key thing in what you said is a high focus on delivering good impact through crypto, right? Like we have to have the really good parts of crypto, and try to reduce the bad parts, right? So like all of these technologies have like good and bad things about them. And crypto has all of this amazing benefit that comes from having, a wallet, which is effectively a bank account on the internet for free, that for very low cost. You don't have to like pay a lot of money to a bank to keep it, and you don't get locked out. Like the wallet cannot lock you out in a way that the bank can, which is like amazing. Then you can pay anybody 24/7. You don't need like bank wires. Like the bank is not gonna like inhibit you from paying somebody or whatever. It's like that already is amazing. Then you have the ability to have loans and simple credit and whatnot. Then you can like do, international payments. And you can then, like also invest in certain things and whatnot. So all of these possibilities are there. There's also like a lot of like noisy bad use cases where like overly speculative things, or like a lot of meme coins. Like meme coins are fun, but like they're not creating a lot of value in and of themselves. Um, and so there's a lot of like things that I don't think are creating that much value for an economy. And so I think we need to focus on delivering the hard impact and the hard benefits for people. This is kind of like why I point people towards these kind of like more important problems in payments or in mortgages or in, corporate registries or like sharing economy jobs. Like creating a thing here where imagining if suddenly we can build networks that suddenly employ 5 million people. Like you go from like 0 to 5 million people employed in like 2 to 3 years. Like that'd be huge for the country, right? Like, it's a country of 46 million people. A lot of people there's like high unemployment. That could be like tremendously valuable right away. And so, let's focus on like that type of impact and creating like really good businesses and good products and services that can benefit like the rest of the world. And that can bring a lot of like wealth creation for people here.
This reminds me a little bit of something that you mentioned a few times, leapfrogging the existing financial system. How would a leapfrog financial system look in your view?
Yeah, it's a great question. So, I mean, kind of, the idea of leapfrogging is that, you have a set of systems that are kind of like at the top of the line, and then you have a system that's kind of maybe behind that then ends up implementing even newer technology and like jumps ahead of everybody else. And that sometimes is easier because the existing top of the line environment, maybe it's kind of like stuck with the current systems and they're not going to upgrade. So for example, one very clear case of this was um, a lot of the US moved to credit cards before the rest of the world, but then other countries ended up being able to leapfrog faster to like mobile payments. And so you had mobile payments in other places around the world before it got to the US, because the US was just like stuck in the existing kind of like payment processor systems, and they needed like a merchant processing system that enabled like the mobile payments thing to appear. And so that like it took a little bit longer. Or like another example of this is like India, where India skipped broadband, like the cable or whatever, and they went straight to wireless technology to like connect everybody with cell networks. And like they leapfrogged the rest of the world, and they suddenly had like some of the biggest deployments in the world of wireless. And so kind of like that, Argentina can do this massive leapfrog in the financial system by kind of like taking the primitives of crypto and imagining how to rework itself to have like this top of the line sort of financial system. So I think like some of the properties that I would love to have is, first of all, like um, the thing people call banks should be something that could be self-custodial, where you should be able to like spin it up one of these in like minutes by going, down either like running some software from the web or by downloading some software in your phone, and that should enable you to have like the equivalent of a bank account, and you should be able to like receive payments or send payments right away. Like wallets already give you a lot of this, but they're not classified as banks. You don't have a bank, and so they don't let you do certain kinds of things. You should be able to have easy access to credit based on like the resources that you have. The resources could be your job and being able to prove that you're going to get a certain salary over time, or assets that you have, like whether it's you have a house or you have a car or something like that. You should be able to like collateralize your assets to be able to like get some credit. You should be able to incorporate companies entirely digitally with like a few clicks. It should cost you less than $1 to do this. You should be able to like just go on a website and incorporate a thing, pass some amount of like identity verification and incorporate a company. And from there, you should be able to like um, hire people, raise investment, ship a product, start collecting payments for your product, all entirely online without having to like ever interact with like kind of like another person in terms of like a lawyer or something like that. That should be entirely asynchronous and self-service. Kind of like Stripe Atlas already does a version of this in the US, but even that is kind of like behind the scenes is kind of implemented with people in some cases. So ideally, this would be like entirely software, all on chain. And then you should be able to think about AI is coming fast, right? And the latest AI models are quite smart. So you should be able to like start plugging in AI into your infrastructure, where you should be able to like have the AI be components that you could employ, or you could task with doing some of the work and whatnot. You should be able to have going back to like mortgages, you should be able to have, at a nationwide, some like strong bedrock for most people in the country to get like a good, savings investment base in order to like be able to generate wealth. In a lot of countries, that's mortgages. In other countries, it's other things. But like I think that could be valuable here. Um, I think another thing would be you want to be able to like, as a company, be able to sell bonds and raise capital that way, or sell stock very easily. So you need some kind of like stock market of some sort, like some kind of stock exchange type of thing. This could be a DEX, right? So you could have like a Uniswap of stock in a sense. And that should be like easy to do directly, kind of again from the web. You should be able to do payments simply. Like you should be able to like just walk to any store and pay with your phone, just with like a tap sort of thing, or like with a watch or whatever, and have that come from like whatever credit card, whatever account you have. So that could be in whatever crypto you choose to hold, right? Like it could be lots of different currencies, or it could be a stable coin, or whatever. Um, and then you should be able to like again, pay or donate to like the things that you care about really easily. Like you shouldn't have to like worry about like a lot of different capital controls and how to like move money or whatever, or like have all these restrictions. You should also, if you're getting paid, you should be able to like have high frequency payments as opposed to like waiting till like the end of the month or whatever. You should be able to like do this on a weekly basis or whatever. And yeah, those are like some of the things that I would like love to see happening.
It's nice that you went from like more like user retail base infrastructure, like okay, you should have your own bank, you should do like be able to send payments, invest, transfer money across, and then you went into more like B2B kind of company-wide situations, like setting a company, raising capital, hiring, and doing a bunch of different things. How can Crecimiento accelerate all of that? What is the path to opportunity? A lot of cool things to do to leapfrog the infrastructure. Crecimiento trying to kickstart that very, very fast and accelerate it.
Yeah.
How do we actually do that?
So I think it all comes down to either helping founders, because all of these problems will be solved by good products, and a good product takes a while to build, and it takes a team of people to build. And so this is really comes down to the individual people that are going to go start these products, and those are like individual founders, whether they're like currently looking for their next thing or currently they're employed somewhere else that might go start something. In fact, like Brian Armstrong, who started Coinbase, was, I think, lived for a while in Buenos Aires and like worked at Airbnb. And it was during that period that he decided to go start Coinbase because he was familiar with like the problem in doing payments all over the world. And so it really kind of like, to accelerate all of this comes down to like the founders. It's like, how do you inspire a lot of people and enable them to discover these problems? So it's like, because we can see a lot of problems and potential opportunities, we should socialize and disseminate these ideas where we can like, maybe have like a request for startups and we build one for the accelerators. But we might want to like collect even more writing about, do some kind of like analysis and research on like, this is what the problem space looks like, and try to get a lot of people to think about that. Because then to be that like, for every, 1,000 people that might look at a problem, maybe only one person might actually go and try to start up a project. And then maybe from like every 10 or 100 that start a project, only one of them might succeed. And so in order to like really play those numbers, you have to like get a very large top of funnel, right? So you want like thousands of people to like consider the problem and think about it deeply, and then realize the opportunity and then kind of go after it. The other thing we need to do to scale this up is to enable potential founders to have resources to learn how to do this, right? So that means like they need to learn how to develop and build a company and so on. All that knowledge is available online for free, but we can maybe collect it and organize it a little bit for people. And so that's where we decided to start a program called Founder School in Crecimiento to like enable people to do this. And then after that, we need to like enable the people who are building some compelling stuff to go through an accelerator to be able to speed up their development and be able to access capital and be able to fundraise and all of that kind of stuff. And like that's where the Crecimiento Accelerators program comes in. And like we're about to have the first accelerator in the community, the Crecimiento and GPC accelerator that starts in early January. Applications are out now, so if you're listening to this, apply for that. And if the application's already passed, go look. Maybe you can still get in and try to apply, or apply to the next one. And so yeah, I think it's like, a set of to speed this up, we want to disseminate a lot of knowledge about the problems and the potential solutions, get as many people to think about this problem as possible, and then from the people that like want to go and start these things, equip them with resources to make their journey a little bit faster, help them learn how to do a lot of this stuff more quickly, and then bring capital to them, and support so that they can have a bit of an easier time fundraising and can get going and build their products. But at the end of the day, like all of that can like maybe just increase the likelihood of success. It's not going to materialize the success on its own. It really comes down to the individual people that are working on the stuff. So it comes down to individual founders excited about a problem, excited about an opportunity, that decide to like take the leap and make the thing. So it's really about inspiring them to go do that.
Basically finding and inspiring the founders.
Yeah.
And how did let me like do a double click on that. How do you do that? How do you get like tens or maybe hundreds, I don't know the math that you did there,
Yeah.
maybe millions of people to look at the problems and a big set of them to actually work on them? What's your take on like really getting it to a lot of people so we get those numbers
Yeah.
to match up?
I mean, I think it's like you want to like think about this problem out loud on the internet. You can like write documents, you can write tweet threads, you can do podcasts, you can express these problems out into the world and point them out to people. And the more people are aware of a problem, the more likely it is to get solved. And so that's like one thing. The second thing is, um, people that are likely to be successful will develop a set of skills over time, and we learn a lot. And whether those people are like right now in school and eventually are going to grow into it, or are currently working somewhere else and are going to decide to like go start this, it comes down to like help them acquire the skills faster. So one of the things that I think, I found things like YC incredibly inspirational, or Silicon Valley incredibly inspirational. And the reason is that both the Silicon Valley community and especially the YC community created this norm of like writing up how to do this stuff, like how um, great founders or great companies got built, and spell it out so that people learn from those experiences and learn from those developments, and where possible find the commonalities and then distill it out into like some resources for people to learn. And so think of it as kind of like startup school in a sense of like learning how to do a lot of this. So all of this kind of resource and material can just like short circuit some of the learning. It'll make it faster. My personal view is that a lot of the people that are gonna be able to do it will be able to figure it out whether or not you give them the resources. It's just that the resources are gonna make it faster for them to do it, right? Like you're gonna get to the success a bit faster.
So we go back to this idea of acceleration and like do a lot of stuff like really fast, maybe like Argentinian accelerationism.
Yes.
A/ECC.
AAC. Oh, that's
AAC,
awesome.
yeah, AAC.
ARAC.
We need to discuss a little bit later. Yeah, but there are some people that already have that on Twitter, very bullish on the Argentinian talent and the founders, and also like really buying this
Yes.
vision that hey, if we get people excited about
Let's
this,
go.
people are gonna build like a real bunch of stuff. We talk about Crecimiento as a movement. How is
Yeah.
the movement idea related to all of this?
Yeah. So I mean, I think when we started all of this together, like there was kind of a question of like how do you build this? Like, do you build this by creating a product or a company or a fund or whatever? It's like no, you actually need something much bigger than all of that, and a movement is kind of that. Movements are organic communities brought together by shared ideals and a vision, and that it ends up catalyzing a lot of activity. And it's just like an organizational structure that has been so successful for millennia. Like some of the most important things that you can think of started as movements. Everything from like the nationalist movements that like created the nations that we have today, or like different entire religions started as movements, or like economic models started as movements, right? So things like capitalism and mercantilism, and there's been a whole other set of movements over time. And so movements are really powerful structures, and it's really about kind of like a shared vision and a shared potential that people recognize. Now, I think the whole thing in this particular case, this movement is very connected to company building and startup building, because we see that the way to solve these financial economic problems is by building products and services that solve the issues. So it's a movement that's connected to a lot of startup acceleration. And so it's a movement to like instigate and inspire and like enable a lot of people to like go and build these like products that end up solving all these problems. So yeah, I think like a movement is like a much faster way of like getting the words across. Like I think in a sense, I tend to think of things like Ethereum as a movement more than a particular technology, and think the entire Web3 crypto thing is a movement. You know, it's not a single blockchain, it's not a single technology or whatever. It's like it's a lot of shared and related technologies and vision and so on that brought a lot of people together. And so these movements end up being really, really impactful. And so I think it's like a good structure.
Well, what are examples of like recent movements could you give us?
I mean, the open source movement, like the idea that like you're going to go and put all the code out there for everybody to collaborate on and work on, it's like that took a movement of people to like go do that. Yeah, Web3 and crypto, the AI technologies movement. Like there's a lot of different AI technologies that are coming together in like this thing that we call AI. I think the there's the economic political sort of movements, or like all the different like forms of government. The libertarian movement, like we have the first libertarian president here right at the moment, right? Like this is like a movement that took many decades to like catalyze this moment. Yeah, so I think like movements are like these really powerful things. Even in music, right? You can think of like music has all these different movements where there's like, again, different people and different organizations that have like a shared perspective and shared vision, and they remix and collaborate and expand, and it's like all very organic and shifts and moves, and it's all dependent on like the people what people decide to do.
So you're the founder of Prego Labs, which is a huge network. We say Prego Labs is also a movement somehow.
It's a good question. Yeah, it's a good question. I don't think PL is a movement yet. I think it could become a movement. I hadn't really thought of it that way. I think PL right now is a network of organizations and people that are together, solving a whole range of hard problems and kind of like driving breakthroughs. And there's a set of like related organizations that help build the infrastructure to enable the network. But yeah, I hadn't really thought about it as a movement. I think if PL was a movement, it would stand for driving breakthroughs in technology to push humanity forward, meaning like there's a set of like really important technological breakthroughs that are going to arrive in the next 5, 10, 20 years. And the faster that we get some, the better it's going to end up. And there's kind of like a differential speed up thing here, where like it's important that some technologies appear before others. This kind of like differential acceleration type of perspective. And so we're PL as a community, is very techno-optimistic and strong believers in the great power of science to understand the universe and distill knowledge into technologies that can be put into objects and products that can then solve a lot of problems, right? So like, you come up with something like germ theory to realize that like there's like bacteria and viruses that infect people, and then like you turn that into like practices like washing hands, or practices like having like isopropyl alcohol to like clean surfaces, and like then there's an industry to like productize alcohol to like distribute it out into the world so that people can like clean hospital surfaces and so on, right? And like the idea of germ theory on its own doesn't save the lives. You need the idea of germ theory and like the idea of how to create products around like technologies, like the use of isopropyl alcohol, and then the technologies and products that like diffuse that set of components around the world. And so like you need this like highly integrated capital, supply chain, idea, knowledge, science, technology system. Some people call that like the techno capital machine these days. That's kind of like the meme for it. But it's kind of like this larger scale social structure that enables like humanity to understand the world, turn it into technologies, and put those technologies into products to then like improve the human condition around the world. Like it's just amazing how in the last 200 years so many of like humanity's toughest problems have disappeared, right? Like child mortality used to be enormous, like high. People used to have like 10 kids in order to have like 1 or 2 survive. And that has totally gone as a problem, right? It's really amazing. And so like there's all these kind of like really critical human well-being questions that have gotten dramatically improved by science and technology. And like the PL community kind of is strongly techno-optimistic, like believes in this sort of thing and grows through it.
I'm going to stick to something very specific that you said. I'll try a hard question. Let's see how it goes. You said that, okay, you discovered germ theory, and then you have like technology and people selling soaps and factories, and you also have like people washing their hands. And that's actually a protocol, which makes sense as we're talking about protocol labs. Sometimes people ask like, okay, awesome, I understand Crecimiento is like amazing opportunity in Argentina. We want to accelerate growth. We want to accelerate like startup founders. We want to find the people who are going to solve the hard problems. Part of that is like finding the people and putting the problem so they start thinking about it. Part of that is like this techno capital machine with the with the accelerator and like the founder school and the hub, this amazing place we are in, the pop-up cities. What is there left for protocols? Like what can we do?
Yeah, it's a great question. So, I mean, I think the whole idea of that the whole startup world idea that you could have a small group of people that could invent a new technology or create a new product and scale it, and that they need to get some startup capital and grow it and so on, is all made up of protocols. Like, you know, the idea that you're gonna incorporate a company and raise funding and so on is really a protocol. It's implemented in terms of legal structures, but that's a protocol. It's like the protocol that you're gonna get together with a set of people and you're gonna invent a thing you call a company. It's imaginary, right? Like it only exists in the idea space.
Somebody with us in this room.
Yeah, exactly, right? Can you point to the company, please? Yeah. Right? Like, and then like, you know, we try to like materialize it in terms of like some like actual paper that like people say like, you know, there's that company that's incorporated and whatnot. And so now we have a company, and like, you know, it got created by, you know, law is like one of the oldest protocol systems, engineering systems. And so like, yeah, I think like the idea that like the whole startup machinery thing is a protocol. Yeah. And there's like sub protocols, like the idea that you're gonna be able to like raise investment through a safe or raise investment through a SAFT or an equity round or whatever. Like that's like a protocol in and of itself. And so I think like a lot of it is like already full of protocols of like how do you know, markets in a sense are protocols. Like you have like buyers and sellers coming together and like this protocol with like certain rules about like how you show the products and the prices and how you do transactions. And so I think there's a lot of like space for both informal protocols that develop organically and then formalized protocols that like get described into like either legal agreements or modern, you know, digital code, computer code protocols. And so I think there's a lot of space for that. But I think maybe more practically, I think part of what you might be getting at is like, hey, is there room here for like a crypto protocol type thing? Like, could we create some like crypto protocol components? And I think there is. I think, you know, you and Emmy and others like thought up this like idea of like saying, hey, what if we were to build like a non-chain digital city, right? Like what if you take like a lot of what we're talking about here with like potentially creating the economic zone and so on, and you materialize it on chain with a specific blockchain, and you say in this blockchain, this is going to apply, this particular jurisdiction was going to have these certain laws, and suddenly, you know, all of the Aleph citizens can get like their credentials in there, and then our transactions are in there, and like all of that is like that city. And like I think that's like a fascinating protocol and like super cool, and I think could like help power the movement. So yeah, I think it's like there's a lot of room and space for protocols. There's also a lot of room for DAOs, you know, like I think DAOs are underused as a way of organizing people, or like digital corporations. Like the original DAOs paper from Vitalik also had DAOs and DACs, decentralized autonomous corporations, and we haven't really seen DACs take off, right? And so we had the first major attempt at enabling DACs through Aragon. Actually, like Aragon tried to set up like the infrastructure, but it didn't quite work. And I think in part because like if you're gonna go and incorporate a company and you have to incorporate it twice, like once on chain and once off chain, there's like a lot of extra work.
Yeah.
And so I think you have to go just one, right? And so like because today you cannot just incorporate a company on chain, you have to do the off chain one, then people default to that. But if we have maybe the on chain city with like corporations in it, and like that becomes like a canonical description of a corporation, then boom, we suddenly have DACs, and like that could be like super powerful and super impactful very quickly. And so I think like there's a lot of space for these kinds of like organizations and protocols on chain that could be very compelling. I think a big piece of that is like public goods funding. Like I think public goods funding is a very, very powerful set of primitives that could be massively impactful. And crypto gives us a way of like creating better markets with them. Yeah.
Well, okay, I'll go back to public good fundings, but I have a question before that. When we talk about movement, it feels like we're talking about culture. You actually mentioned like music and some other stuff that is like
Yeah.
oh, this is a movement, so cool. People get tattoos, people get like things on Twitter. And then when we talk about protocols, we talk about more like maybe law, maybe smart contracts, which is code but has the word contracts in it. So there's some relation. What is the relation between culture and law and like code?
Yeah, it's a great question. So, I mean, I really see law as the programming language of civilization. It's kind of like computer code before, like humans are computers in a sense. Like we can follow instructions, we can create. We're just like very advanced and capable computers, so we don't have to like just follow single instructions. We can like have multiple instruction sets and combine them and reason about them very intelligently. And so you can like get by with like a very bad computer code version, like the legal landscape, like the very first legal structure, like in the Code of Hammurabi and like other codes where like just a bunch of you take a big rock and you carve some rules into it and like boom, like if you don't agree with that, like we're gonna like punish you or whatever. And like suddenly that can organize a lot of people. And even before like all the oral tradition laws. So like yeah, culture, like laws encode a set of cultural practices into a rule set that then gives you the ability to attach game theoretic incentives, right? So I think it's not sufficient to encode what happens. For law to really work, you have to have a set of benefits or punishments that come along with a rule. It's a definition of like what should happen and what happens if you don't follow the rule. It's an expression of a rule with a consequence. And if you express that and fulfill it, then you get the game theoretic incentives to shape a civilization, right? So if you want to organize, thousands of people in a certain way, like if you want to come up with the concept of like, if people are like going around like taking each other's stuff and, you can't like even have a house because like in the middle of the night, someone's going to show up and kick you out of it or whatever. Like, then you need to come up with like the idea of like, okay, well, we need a system for like tracking whose house is whose, and then set a set of rules of like you don't get to like just go and take somebody else's stuff. You have to agree to exchange it. And like that's a set of rules. And what happens if you don't do that? If you go and like just kick somebody out of their house? Well, we're gonna have to like you know take it back or like put you in jail or whatever, right? And so some other set of consequences. And so I think like you need laws and rule sets and structures in order to create this like game theoretic environment to enable like civilization to form. And now there's like, of course, like you can over specify if you go too far in that direction and you specify too many things, then you put in so much red tape that it's just very difficult to get anything done, and you erode the incentives of people to actually solve problems. And this is what happens with like over regulation and what you then need to like deregulate things. And so what you want is kind of like the minimal set possible of rules to lead to like a very good flourishing civilization, and to enable kind of like mutually beneficial agreements to happen. I think Pareto optimality here is like a good concept where like you want people to just be entering into agreements that are mutually beneficial always, and like prefer things that are going to be like creating value for everybody involved, like positive sum games. And I think like that coordination possibility that is enabled by rules and laws and civilization is like really, really powerful. And then kind of like code comes in because now that we have digital computers and we have the internet and we all walk around with these like supercomputers in our pockets, we now can take these like rule sets and then encode them into like automatic machinery where like we now have like physical systems, physical objects that follow those rules, or where like you can encode like these rules at a large scale globally that affect now not just the people locally, but like affect the people globally. And so now you can have like rule sets everywhere, right? One of my favorite examples of this in crypto is like just the idea of the block reward, where you have like a currency with an emission schedule that just says this amount of currency is going to be emitted to whoever can show this amount of work being done. Like that is the foundational primitive for all deep-in networks, right? Like the ability to like amass these huge collections of resources around the world just all fall out of this very simple, very basic incentive structure of like, if there's a financial reward in the sky that's just going to reward you for creating work, it's like a new form of employment, right? Like it's not like you having to sign up and agree to work for a thing. It's like you can do your own work and you like sell it to the network in a sense, and the network benefits from it. And so I think it's a super, super powerful primitive.
I was thinking it like somehow like a funnel in which you have like culture and then like law and then code. But actually like your reply is like, wait, law is actually shaping culture, and code is actually shaping culture, because Bitcoin has like a very specific culture that is very much shaped by the code and the laws embedded in the code. And that kind of brings me back to Crecimiento and everything we're trying to do. If we want like all these founders to build things very fast and try out and solve these problems, and we want them to do it like in a very short period of time and stay in Argentina, not them moving somewhere else or incorporating somewhere else and investing their capital somewhere else. It seems like we also need to activate like
Yeah.
the code and the law. What do you think? Can you expand on those ideas?
Yeah. So, I mean, I think, yeah, I mean, I think culture is just such a fundamental element of all of this. It's about disseminating a set of ideas that form a culture together. And then, I think law is the existing rule set or code from a nation or state level that you have to like follow. And they kind of, that governs sort of like the civilization at large. And you have to, whatever you do has to kind of like comply with like the rule sets in these environments. Or like work on evolving them, right? Like if you think they're outdated and broken, then you have to work with governments to like evolve them. And then the other part is code is the rule set of the world now. Like the international and global world runs on code, not on like traditional law. And that is kind of like the legal framework of the future. And so now you can use code to both or build products and systems, but you can also use code to like create these new incentive structures and these new like meta structures that can like cause a lot of like positive impact. Can also cause bad impact. Don't do that. Like, don't do bad things. Do like choose to do good things. Positive sum games are like dramatically better than like negative sum games. The future has so much value to create. Like you just want to orient for like good positive sum things. So I think you can like use, you can inspire a set of people with a culture and with a vision and with like the principles and the ideas and so on. And then that will like distill, a set of things that we're going to go build, and we're going to embody those things in like the code that we ship out into the world. And so I think like I really think there's probably a lot of opportunity here for people to experiment, kind of like at a Crecimiento movement level with different protocols or structures or code that like can help the movement itself grow. I think that would be pretty cool. Like maybe some of the ecosystem programs can be built as protocols, which I think could be pretty powerful.
You built my way back into public good fundings perfectly. I don't know if you did it on purpose, but thank you very much for that. My view on public good fundings sometimes is that there's like these very interesting like mechanisms, but sometimes there's not enough traction, either because there's like some lack of funding for them, or because there's like lack of interest in the builders in getting funding in those ways. What's your take in that? And if you could relate your reply to what's going on in Crecimiento, Argentina.
So I think public funding is one of these weird things where there just hasn't been like public goods are these goods that a lot of society has, and which are like public resources that are non-excludable and non-arrival to us. So things like the air that we breathe, and so on. And a lot of these public goods are always like a little bit squishy because they're public with respect to a specific community. Like not everybody can get access to the same air. Not everyone can get access to the same water. Not everyone can get access to the same community hub or whatever. And so in reality, all public goods are kind of like a very big club goods in a sense. And it's also the case that like a lot of resources, when you look at them on a large enough time scale, they're all exhaustible, right? Like they're just a limited amount of air in the planet. It feels like it's infinite, but it's not actually infinite. So really kind of like public goods are always described with respect to a particular community of people that benefits from that set of goods. And what's really interesting about them is like, how do you provision for these public goods? Do they just kind of exist and we're using them and they're going to whittle down and like eventually disappear, kind of like some natural resource that like eventually gets extinguished? Or is there like a regenerative cycle where we get to use the good, but then like it turns into something else and then it comes back in the future, kind of like the different like oxygen cycle or like the carbon cycle and so on? Or is there a structure where this good is actually hard to build and expensive to build, but it's very difficult to fund these things. So a traditional private sense is difficult to like put a paywall behind it or whatever. It's going to inhibit, something like software or that kind of wants to be open source, or a class or like teaching materials and whatnot. If you put a paywall on it, then you're inhibiting its spread and inhibiting its effect. And so that runs counter to the idea of public goods, right? Like the scientific results of the world should be public goods that everyone gets a benefit from. And so you want to come up with an economic model for how do you build those public goods in the first place from all of the people that are benefiting from those goods. And a really important kicker here is that people benefit different amounts. Not everyone benefits the same amount from the goods, and you ideally want to take that into account. And so in a sense, like, this is where the idea of taxes came from. Like, the idea was that, like, hey, there are these kind of public goods that are important, like stability, government stability and security and safety and whatnot. And you're gonna like come together and pool some money and pay some taxes together to then like buy collective security. And that's, a lot of governments around in the last few thousand years have done really good work with some of those tax structures. Now, unfortunately, though, the way that governments tend to work and the power imbalance in controlling, the monopoly and violence means that many governments around the world have greatly abused that power and then extracted those taxes very unfairly and also misspent all of those taxes, right? One fundamental issue that current government spending has in terms of public goods is that it's very difficult to mix markets and government spending. Some very good governments do this. So like, some of the Nordic countries that, many people sort of see as like, very high taxes and so on, the way that they apply those taxes is by using corporations. Instead of like a government implementing a lot of things in terms of an agency, they just hire companies to do all of the work. And if those companies underperform, other companies get hired. And, there's some governments that try to do it all themselves. And like, eventually then that doesn't work and it gets stifled and whatnot. Because human organizations, once they get big enough, start degrading. And so you want kind of like a smaller, more modular system. That's why capitalism is so effective relative to other systems. It's very modular. And if a system is not going to work, if one unit is going to fail, like it's just going to die and give rise to a new one, it's kind of an evolutionary framework. Like capitalism is evolutionary. Right? You can create new companies, you can grow them, they can die. Whereas many other systems, like like communism, for example, is not evolutionary. It's like strict and rigid and whatnot, and like it breaks down if it starts like it'll sort of like fall apart. It's never worked at scale. In fact, even China today, like some of its greatest success comes from implementing a capitalist structure within the Chinese framework, right? And so like I think one of the key things there is like now when you think about holy goods is like you want to create some infrastructure by which you can gather together funding to be able to fund public goods. And you want to, now that we have markets and financial instruments in crypto, you can come up with some very clever structures to enable the people that benefit from those goods to fund them together, ideally proportionally based on like what they benefit. So, quadratic funding is a good version of doing this, where like you have a shared pool of resources, but the way the shared pool of resources gets spent is that people have to donate to specific projects that they would like to see. And this donation is not really a donation, it's really a payment, because they're benefiting from that public good. So they're really just buying the public good. But then you get this kicker where like if a lot of people buy the same good, then more of the treasury goes to that thing. And so I think the public goods landscape has a lot of like interesting ideas for how to like greatly experiment with and develop new funding structures to develop and provision all of these kind of public goods. And it's I think like a way of like mixing, like applying capitalism to the idea of like public resources, which usually doesn't get seen that way, right? Like capitalism only gets seen as like private interests and whatnot. And really kind of the idea space is actually much larger. It's like you can imagine all of these different kind of economic primitives like working with like markets and with like self-interest in how you participate and whatnot. At the end of the day, all of these things, all of the economic models are different distributed systems written in laws and in code that run in different people, right? It's a culture and a set of behaviors that develop a set of strategies to try and like enable a society or a civilization to work well enough and perform well enough. And some of them will have like different feature sets that will work at certain scales. Like one of the things that like, I often think about is like, part of what made capitalism so successful is like it works really well at the larger scale. At the larger scale, it distributes, along the supply chain extremely well. But at the very small scale, like in your family, like you're not gonna be a hyper capitalist of like, the mom charging the children for like a hug, right? Like, it's like that's not like at a very small scale, it doesn't work. But at the and it'll just like be complete. It'll feel like awful and like what is this? But in reality, it starts working at like at a few thousand people, and then suddenly that actually scales really well. And kind of like the and so a lot of, for example, communism came from like the communes that worked really well
Yeah.
in like a few houses that like shared labor and whatnot, and it worked. And then they try to scale that to like nation state level, and it did not work at all, right? Like because suddenly you had people pretending that certain things were happening a certain because of how it got implemented. You had like all these bad information policies where people were just lying to their governments about what was going on, and you had these massive famines, in China and Ukraine and in other places where like it just like that system did not at all contend with like the real world in terms of production and the massive scale required in order to organize millions of people to produce good high quality results, right? The idea that like you have a market where people compete in order to produce like the best highest quality item is like a really, really, really powerful one to like help organize, tons of people around the planet.
There's many great insights
Yep.
in all of you said, especially like this idea of, okay, certain things work at this scale, but then they don't scale well. But then markets work pretty good for some things. How did these ideas shape Crecimiento and the movement concept that we talked so much about?
Yeah. Yeah. It's a good question. I mean, I think a lot of people here are very crypto native, and so they're very used to financial instruments and crypto incentives and so on. So everyone comes in with like that perspective. Also, everybody's like more libertarian in a sense. Like a lot of people, I don't know if they would describe themselves as libertarian, but they tend to be more libertarian in terms of like the ethos of crypto and the ethos of decentralization and the ethos of like, kind of like less rule sets and more like voluntary cooperation and whatnot. So it kind of like aligns with that. And so I think like, and I think a lot of people are like very familiar with like the difficulty in producing things, producing software, producing ideas, running products, developing out into the world. Like all of that stuff is, um, like the whole supply chain of like building a product is like well understood. And then of course it's just like the reality of being in like a large scale capitalist world where you need to, if you want to like change the world, like the best, most successful way to do it is you build a very successful company and you scale it and you deliver products to the world. In order to do that, you need to like be able to employ people and you have to raise capital and all that kind of stuff. So you have like all these systems. At the end of the day, like all of these structures, corporations, money, credit, or whatever, they're just inventions, like things that we invented to help us coordinate at these very, very large scales. And all of them can be improved. All of these different ideas are just inventions that came in at a certain point in time, and they can all be improved. So you can like think of like new structures. It's just that when we do those new inventions, we have to like really make sure they work better. There's been some periods in history where like people did not actually check that these things actually worked better, and like they try to implement them at scale. Like I think that's one of the biggest problems in the 20th century is like people that did bad economic philosophy, like kind of bait and switched a lot of people by trying to create like a moral imperative in implementing a system that just did not work, and it just caused like some of the biggest um, genocides in history. Like tens of millions of people died because of that. It's crazy, but that sort of happened. And so I think like we need systems that work, systems that can empirically be shown to work across a wide variety of strategies, and you need like kind of when you're thinking about financial innovation or economy innovation, whole economy innovation, you want these new primitives that get invented or discovered or built. You want it to really work, and you want it to test them. Sometimes you can test them in simulation. Sometimes you can come up with some analytical solutions, but in practice, you'll have to test them in the real world at different degrees of scale. And it's always much better to like test things at small to medium scale, to see how well they work before you like scale them out.
You talked a lot about systems. You talked a lot about like massive problems with the world. You talked about changing the world. How can the individual influence those systems, those incentives, those big structures that are like shaping this, everyone else?
Yeah. Well, I mean, everything around you was built by somebody else. So whether it's like something that got manufactured at scale or whether it's just an idea. Somebody initially had or shaped or remixed that idea, and individuals can have massive scale impact by just kind of like thinking about the current state of the world, imagining a better future, and then working backward from that better future of figuring out like how do you get there. Like sometimes it's about something, sometimes it can be as simple as an idea. Like one idea well described can have transformative impact. The last few couple thousand years have shown, 2 to 4,000 years have shown many examples where like specific ideas well described can change the entire world. Think of like, I don't know, Euclid's Elements, or like Newton's Principia, or like the scientific method, or going back to germ theory, or like the idea of like creating a corporate registry, right? Like the initial companies were like chartered by kings, right? And you had to like go and appeal to the king to try and like create a company, and that's why you only got these mega companies like the British East India Company and so on. Once you had the ability of like easily incorporating a company with limited liability, with the ability to sell stock, and so on, like that sped up like all the industrial revolution. We like really advanced massively thanks to that. There's like an interesting question is like, what would have happened if like the Roman Republic had corporations? Like if you had an easy corporate registry with limited liability that anybody could start, and a stock market, could the Roman Republic had industrialized? And like there's a possibility that it could have, because unfortunately the Roman Republic was like very subject to like the interests of specific families, because the version of a company back then was like the family, and like the big family with resources, and so it wasn't as innovative. So yeah, I think individuals can have like an enormous impact by thinking about the right ideas, thinking about the right missions and problems to solve, and then just go solve them, right? Like you can imagine that better future. You can like break it down in terms of like what needs to happen, and then think of like the different steps and start taking those steps. Everything as simple as like how to come up with a new protocol to solve some problem, or like how do you do the mortgages thing, or on chain, or whatever, and all the way to like kind of like an Elon level. Hey, humanity needs to become multiplanetary. We need to get to Mars. How do we build a city on Mars? Okay, well, we need to like create reusable launch vehicles, and here's how we do that and whatnot. So like you can take these massive scale problems and break them down into smaller problems that you can solve along the way. And so part of that is painting the vision, part of that is connecting the milestones along the way. But honestly, like even things that might feel like a small low effort contribution can be tremendously impactful if they're like the right thing at the right time. And so everything from like ideas and helping chip into in some perspective, or helping spread the word. Sometimes like being able to like get more people to look at something can be super impactful. Oftentimes it's kind of like, oh, a friend, somebody might be listening to this and might know somebody who would like really like to listen to it, and just sending it to them. It may turn out that like that person that you sent it to turns out to be like the founder that solves the mortgages thing, that hears about this, understands the problem, and like comes and solves the issue, right? So like that could be like super impactful.
It would be great if someone hears this and is like, hey, you should check this podcast out, and then they are solving the big problem. So, something that you kind of mentioned, but it's related to a conversation that we had a few days or weeks ago, and I really like, is like goal setting and going backwards. So not understanding like where you are and just like, okay, we can go here, but understanding where you want to be and then trying to build it the other way around. Could you expand on that idea? I think it would be very useful for people that are hearing this and they're like, want to do
Yeah, so
something.
you're talking about kind of like back calculating from success sort of thing. Yeah, so a lot of people, a lot of very smart and capable people do goal setting by calculating forward. They calculate from the current status out to where they could be. So they look at where they are today, and they look at kind of like their growth trajectory so far, and they maybe plot out like where they could be a year from now or 5 years from now. And sometimes those people will be like, oh, actually, like, I don't like that target. We should be doing better. So they can become a little bit more aggressive and be like, oh, actually, like we should be growing at this like slightly higher growth rate and try to like aim to this other level. But in reality, a lot of times I just see a lot of cases where that approach to goal setting just misses the mark. It's just not ambitious enough. It just kind of you sort of like, I'm never gonna quite get a success if you do that. Especially when it comes to time, things that you have to do in a certain amount of time. Instead, what I think is like a much more effective way of goal setting, and I think, Amazon agrees with this, entire like Amazon culture agrees with this. I think Elon and the Elon companies agree with this. A lot of like very successful like movements and groups kind of agree with this. Like you can find this idea all over the place. And the idea is to back calculate from success. This means visualize what success looks like and get clear about that. Like what happens in that success? Like what does it look like concretely? If you're building a product, what does the product look like? If you're trying to catalyze some change, what does the change really mean? What happened in order to cause that change? And fix it in time. Like actually figure out what date is it when this change has happened. Is that 1 year out? Is that 5 years out? Is that 10 years out? And then once you kind of like visualize what that future success looks like, you want to try and like figure out like what's like really critical in that success. And then you want to start back calculating from that period to today. So pick a point, halfway in between. And, if you're going to go from like where you are today to that great success, 10 years out, then 5 years out, you should be like at least halfway to that success, right? Roughly. Maybe if you take into account like, super linear growth rates, maybe you could be like, 1/10 of the way there if you plan to grow like an order of magnitude or something like that. But that's even, harder. I think it's better to be like, to plot out like linear growth, because that's, if you could grow super linearly, great. And so, halfway in the time, you should be about halfway to like your success, or maybe with a little bit of bend. But you certainly shouldn't be like 1/100th of the way. You're just like not going to make it, right? And so if you do this and you keep interpolating points between where you are today to your goal, like if you figure out like where you need to be in 10 years and in 5 years and in 2.5 years and in 1 year and 6 months from now and 3 months from now, then you have a very clear picture of what you need to do to succeed. Like, and you have like a very realistic check of what the actual numbers need to be. Like if you, say that in 10 years, you want to have, 100 million users, then 5 years out, you should have something like 50 million users. Again, you could have like 10 million users and grow at 10x, so that's possible. But you should have something like that. You should not have 1,000 users 5 years from now, right? And so then 2.5 years from now, you should have somewhere close to like 25 million users or 2.5 million users, something like that. Then a year out, you should have something like 500K to 10 million users or something. And then 6 months out, you should have like a few 100,000 users. And so like that is much more achievable. Like 6 months out from now, having 100,000 users feels really hard. Like that is a hard problem, but that's kind of what you need in order to get to like the 100 million 10 years out. Again, like exponential growth rates are awesome, and in some cases you can grow much faster. So like your curve here might vary. Like you might have a curve that like grows by a power of 10 every year, and like that's awesome. But the whole point is that you want to back calculate from visualizing success. You don't want to forward calculate from where you are and what your current growth rate is. I think that second approach just tends to just underperform this idea of like back calculating from like the clear success.
So instead of standing here and say, hey, extra 30% next year, you should go like, oh, if I want to do this and I'm serious about it, I need like 1 million users or whatever. I need much more than 30% increase the next year. And I sorry I didn't plan this, but we're kind of reaching the end of the interview, and we're talking about goal settings. We talked about success, leapfrogging infrastructure, examples, many different things, building startups, Argentina opportunity, like the impact of laws and culture. Let's do some like goal setting.
Yeah.
What do you think like success looks like in the most detailed way you can give us, and like what should happen in
For
the next
Crecimiento?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a great question. So, and I think you and I have done some of this work together already. So like, I think my perspective is that before Milei is out, we should have around 5 to 10 million more people on crypto in Argentina, and we should have strong financial success for like 10 to 20 million people in Argentina. And those are like really hard goals, right?
Yeah.
Like we're talking about like major scale impact in the country. And I think we can get there by a few ways. One is through improving, again, access to capital, payments, and so on. Another way is by creating jobs. So like sharing economy type things that can just employ a lot of people. And so like I think those two ways are like pretty high value ways of doing that. Now, in order to like solve a lot of these financial infrastructure problems, like the mortgages thing and so on, or like creating the sharing economy type products, we're gonna need a lot of companies to try to do that. So we're gonna need a lot of founders that like try and build those things. So that means that like, before Millet is out, so which could be like, somewhere between 1.5 to like, 6 years or whatever, 7 years. We need to get to kind of like that level of success. So let's take 2026 as an example. If Millet ends up winning again, then that extends the time frame, but it's not clear that he would also keep the Senate and whatnot. So like let's just say 2026. So by 2026, we should have, because also the companies are going to take a while to grow. Like once the company gets started, it usually takes somewhere between 1 to 3 years to find product market fit, and then from there grow to be more successful and whatnot. So by 2026, which is the end of 2026, so that's like 2 years from now, we should have somewhere between 10 to 20 very successful products and startups that like are clearly solving some large scale financial infrastructure problem or helping create a lot of jobs. And by that point, in order to get to those like 10 to 20 that look to be like very strong and very successful, we're gonna need, because of the startup survival rates, we're gonna need a few hundred companies to get started. And so that means that between now and the end of 2026, we need somewhere between like 2 to 600 companies to get started. And so in order to get there, then we need like a number of accelerator programs that can support those founders. And then we need to help find and support those founders. So there's like, a few hundred founders out there that like are already starting their companies now today, that we need to find and help support. Or there are people that are currently not founding a company, but then might get interested in founding a company sometime in the next few months, that we need to like equip with resources for them to like understand how to do it. And so, if we're talking about like 2 to 600 companies, then that's somewhere between 500 to a couple thousand founders. So somewhere between 500 to a couple thousand, like pretty strong founders, right? And so a lot of people might be interested in trying it and so on, but they might not like sort of like get there. So if 500 to 2,000 might blow up to like somewhere between 1,000 and 10,000 people, like developers and builders and so on, that might want to try and become a founder, only some of which will like kind of make it. And so that really means like reaching many thousands of people in this 2-year time frame. And so that means like we need to get the word out to that many along the way. So now kind of like, where should we be maybe a year out from now, kind of like in the 25 to 26 end, so like December 25, we should have a few hundred startups already built, right? Like it started. So we should have something like somewhere between 100 to 300 startups already built. So the good news there is that like earlier in the year, we had 60 in Aleph. A lot of those had already started. We're about to have another set in the GPC accelerator. We're going to have some more accelerators after. But those are like, hard numbers, like going to like, 100 to 300 this year in 2025 is like a large number. And that means, somewhere between, 250 to like 1,000 founders. So that's kind of like the numbers. Yep.
That's going to be hard for us. It's going to require to do a lot of things. It's also going to be very hard for the founders. So it's also nice to, hey, there's a great opportunity. You can solve real problems, have massive impact in like millions of people's life, but that's going to be hard. If those founders are listening to it, how could you inspire them? What would you tell them?
Well, I think the opportunity is massive, right? So I think this, think about the opportunity potential here of solving a massive scale problem that could benefit the lives of millions of people. So like you can have like a real dramatic impact in the lives of millions of people and help the conditions out there, both by solving a significant problem or by helping figure out how to create a product or service that can employ millions of people and help, generate cash flow for them. So I think that could be like a pretty significant, that like the impact I think will be very motivating for a lot of people. Second, because we live in a capitalist system, if you solve problems for society, society tends to reward you greatly, meaning we have infrastructure set up with incentive structures where if you can do this very successfully as a company, you can make a lot of money yourself. And so that'll benefit you individually and your family. And what tends to be more common, especially in founders of tech companies, is that you'll make enough money to like live comfortably, but you won't care about the much. What you'll care about is like having the capital to like invest in your own projects, right? So like what tends to happen with kind of founder level success in technology companies is that you then get a lot of capital that you can then allocate to do the really more ambitious, crazy things that maybe you cannot get other investors to fund. Elon could only afford to do SpaceX after being financially successful with Zip2, right? And so he first had to build like the yellow pages on the internet thing. I'm sure he at the time wish he could build SpaceX, but he couldn't. He did not have the money to do it, and there's no way that he could have gotten investment. Even after being successful with Zip2, he couldn't, start and he couldn't raise money for SpaceX until much later. He had to like fund it himself personally. In fact, he funded Tesla. Tesla couldn't get much investment from other investors. They had to like get somebody like Elon. So many important things are like, by the way, investing is such an important element here. Like and that's why it's so well rewarded. It's like, it's a crucial thing to enable a large community of people to figure out what's going to work out in the future and be successful, and be important and valuable. And, like investing can be like a very, very successful thing. So like you could build a company, be very financially successful, and then either go and build another one that's like even more crazy and more compelling, that you are really interested in, or you could then start investing the capital in like the next generation of founders and help support them and help them grow and help shape the future that you want by being able to like put your money where your mouth is and being able to like orient things. I think right now the world doesn't have like a mix between like today like personal capital is the capital you also get to allocate to projects, which is a little bit weird when you think about like most of the very successful founders out there in the world. They've created so much wealth for the world and they got greatly rewarded for it, but they themselves don't care about spending that wealth. They're not out there like buying yachts and like, yeah, exactly, like and there's only like so much of that stuff that you can possibly buy, right? Like in reality, what they use that money for is they invested in like the productive capacity of the nation. Like most of all that wealth is on paper in like actually held as stocks in some corporation, and is actually money that's being put to use. It's not like money sitting in a bank vault. It's money that's being put to use in a corporation. And so you would have the ability to like direct that kind of like capital, and then kind of like put it to the productive capacity that you think is critical, right? So like maybe I don't know, like you think like nuclear energy should grow, or like solar energy should grow instead of nuclear, or like maybe you're really interested in space and you want more space exploration, or maybe you really care about biodiversity and you want to like enable to fund a lot of institutes researching that. Or maybe you're interested in like cities being built in the ocean, or like maybe you're interested in like advancing medicine and finding cures for cancer or for some other disease, and you can like go and fund that. And so like today, the way the world works is like so much of this development ends up being funded by individual people, not just governments, because individual people end up like having to like do a lot of the search process of what exactly to fund. And so, one motivating fact. So one part of the motivation is like the amazing positive impact you can have on Argentina and the people around you. Another motivating factor is that if you're very successful, you can then get the capital required to have even more impact, or solve some like really large problems, or help support like the economy and the country at an even deeper level by contributing to the productive capacity. And by the way, you like live well, and you and your family will live really well into the future. And then maybe, a third motivator is like, it's really fun. Like, I don't know, building, like building startups is hard. And, the people talk about it in terms of the roller coaster of like, the lows are low, but the highs are high. Like it can be just so compelling and amazing to be in like a group of people are like solving some really hard problems and like inventing the future. So it can be like super, super, super fun. One of the big elements of Silicon Valley culture has always been just how much fun people had building this kind of things. It's a little bit harder in remote cultures. It's harder to have fun as a group in a remote culture. But that's kind of partly why there's so many conferences, because people end up like,
and we have a hub.
Yeah, and we have a hub. Like in Crecimiento, we have a hub, and you can come and hang out and have fun together. So I think fun is like another really big incentive. And another is like the relationships you'll build. Like some of your best friends and the people that you care about the most in the world will come from your coworkers that you end up building these companies with and building these solutions with, or they might even be your users or your partners or your investors or like whatever. Like you'll create like building one of these startups is a shot at improving the future. It's a shot at finding a lot of other amazing people, building strong relationships, having a lot of fun. It is difficult, startups are hard, It is a roller coaster. Highs are high, lows are low. But hopefully we're here and can help support you through that, all of that stuff. And at the end of the day, it's kind of like, why not? What do you have to lose? Like I think people tend to overestimate the risk. At the end of the day, and especially maybe in a country with like a lot of high inflation,
Yeah.
like the risk is a lot lower. And especially like now you can like, now that like it just flipped into lower inflation, and you have access to stable coins, now you can like build a lot of wealth. A lot of the risk tends to be low. I think it's more about the effort that goes into it, and the energy, and hopefully with that, like we as a community can build like the right cultural space to like help support everybody. I think like that's one of the big things that Silicon Valley did, is like created a culture that both like inspired and held up people up to like high standards, but also created a little bit of a cushion, and it made it okay to fail, and made it easier to go through like the low times. I think some of the I think that's something that I think could be very valuable.
So, some people say that Crecimiento is trying to build the Silicon Valley of crypto in Buenos Aires. Do you agree with that?
I think I think it's a good model. Yeah.
Let's close with your most fun moment during the whole Crecimiento trip.
Oh man, the most fun moment. Honestly, like the closing ceremony in the first Aleph in August, that to me was like such a compelling, amazing moment of like everybody together, and being able to see like what we had built together. Like that was just super, super fun and special. I think maybe this time. Oh, actually, like the memes. There was one like staff meeting that we had with like all of the memes, and that was hilarious. I think Argentina has like a really good meme culture. I really, really like that. I think things are very good.
Awesome. Yeah, the memes were pretty good.
Yeah.
Any last message for people hearing this?
Thanks for listening. Send this out to other folks that you think might be interested, and come join the movement. Come help grow Argentina. Come help grow crypto, and just really build the future that you want to see in the world. Because if you don't do it, nobody will. So like, take matters into your own hands, build the future, and come join us. Let's grow together.